So let's move on to Harry Stack Sullivan's interpersonal theory, wherein it emphasizes the importance of various developmental stages: the infancy, childhood, juvenile era, pre-adolescence, early and late adolescence, and lastly, the adulthood. Also, these theories believe that people achieve healthy development when they are able to experience both intimacy and lust toward the others. The first stage of Sullivan's stage of development is the infancy. It is about age 0 to 2 years, wherein the infant becomes human through tenderness which he receives from its mothering one. The second stage is the childhood, that varies from culture to culture and from individual to individual. Covers the period from 2 to 6 years. Also, good and bad are implied social or moral value that no longer refer to absence or presence of that painful tension called anxiety. Besides the parents, children often have one other significant relationship, which is the imaginary playmate. Childhood period is of a rapid acculturation, learning the importance of dramatization and preoccupation. Third stage is what we call the juvenile era. That occurs 6 to 8.5 years. It is a belief that a child learns to compete, compromise, and cooperate. Fourth stage, moving to pre-adolescence, begins at 8.5 until 13, a time for intimacy with a particular person, usually a person of the same gender or what we call the single chum. The outstanding characteristic of this stage is the capacity to love that exists when satisfaction or security becomes significant to one's own self. Early adolescence as the fifth stage begins at 13 years of age until 15. It is now accompanied by a parallel but separate need. Intimacy and lust toward different persons are frequently in conflict during this stage. Sullivan also believed that early adolescence is a turning point in personality development. The sixth and the last stage of development is what we call the late adolescence. It is when people are able to feel both lust and intimacy towards others, a fusion of those two characteristics establishing a lasting love, an individual becoming a lover, and a discovery of self and the world outside one's own self.
As mentioned earlier, on the stages of development, Sullivan conceptualized personality as energy system, with energy existing either as tension or the potentiality for action, and or as energy transformation, the action themselves. There are two types of tension described by Sullivan. First is the needs. It is the tension brought on by the biological imbalance between a person and the physiochemical environment. Needs can either to the general well-being, or which is the general need of a person, or to a specific person, which is the zonal need, such as mouth or genitals. General needs can either be physiological and interpersonal. Second types of tension is the anxiety, disjunctive and calls for no consistent action for its relief. Anxiety is the chief disruptive force in interpersonal relationships. Tension transforming into action, either overt or covert. The item of satisfying needs and reducing anxiety can either be in the form of emotion or thoughts, and that is for energy transformation. Sullivan used dynamism to refer to a typical pattern of behavior. First is the malevolence, disjunctive dynamism of evil and hatred. It is a feeling of living among one's enemy. Second is the intimacy. It is a conjunctive dynamism marked by a close personal relationship between two people of equal status. Third is the last, the isolating dynamism. which is life-centered need that can be satisfied in the absence of intimate ITR. In the other words, although intimacy presupposes tenderness or love, lust is based solely on sexual gratification and requires no other person for its satisfaction. Lastly is the self system, the most inclusive of all dynamism. Conjunctive dynamism is primary to protect the self from anxiety. It tends to stifle personality change. For the levels of cognition, Sullivan stated 3 levels. First is the prototaxic, second is the parataxic, and third is the syntaxic. For the prototaxic level, it is the experiences that are impossible to put into words or to communicate to others. Parataxic level, on the other hand, is the experiences that are pre-logical and nearly impossible to accurately communicate to others. Lastly, and not the least, syntaxic level, which are the experiences that can accurately communicate to others.
Interpersonal theory of Sullivan, based on his therapeutic procedure, on an effort to improve a patient relationship with others, is to facilitate the process that the therapist serves as participant observer, becoming a part in a face-to-face relationship with the patient, providing an opportunity to establish syntaxic communication with other beings. It is aimed at uncovering patient difficulties in relating to others.
Now, for the last psychodynamic theories, it is Erikson's post-Freudian theory. Ego is the center of personality and is responsible for a unified sense of self. This ego develops according to epigenetic principle, that is, it grows according to a genetically established rate and in a fixed sequence. Erikson has stages of development and is marked by a conflict between a syntonic or the harmonious element and the stonic or the destructive element, which produces basic strength or ego quality, and if not resolved, it produces core pathology.
So to give you an example, here's a video from Sprouts.
Erikson's theory of psychosocial development identifies 8 stages which a healthy individual should pass through from birth to death. At each stage, we encounter different needs, ask new questions, and meet people who influence our behavior and learning. Stage 1. Basic trust versus mistrust. As infants, we ask ourselves if we can trust the world, and we wonder if it's safe. We learn that if we can trust someone now, we can also trust others in the future. If we experience fear, we develop doubt and mistrust. The key to our development is our mother. Stage 2. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. In our early childhood, we experience ourselves and discover our body. We ask, is it okay to be me? If we are allowed to discover ourselves, then we develop self-confidence. If we are not, we can develop shame and self-doubt. Both parents now play a major role. Stage 3. Initiative versus guilt. In preschool, we take initiative, try out new things, and learn basic principles like how round things roll. We ask, is it okay for me to do what I do? If we are encouraged, we can follow our interests. If we are held back or told that what we do is silly, we can develop guilt. We are now learning from the entire family. Stage 4. Industry versus inferiority. Now we discover our own interests and realize that we are different from others. We want to show that we can do things right. We ask if we can make it in this world. If we receive recognition from our teachers or peers, we become industrious, which is another word for hard-working. If we get too much negative feedback, we start to feel inferior and lose motivation. Our neighbors and schools now influence us the most. Stage 5. Identity versus role confusion. During adolescence, we learn that we have different social roles. We are friends, students, children, and citizens. Many experience an identity crisis. If our parents now allow us to go out and explore, we can find identity. If they push us to conform to their views, we can face role confusion and feel lost. Key to our learning are our peers and role models. Stage 6. Intimacy versus isolation. As young adults, we slowly understand who we are, and we start to let go of the relationships we had built earlier in order to fit in. We ask ourselves if we can love. If we can make a long-term commitment, we are confident and happy. If we cannot form intimate relationships, we might end up feeling isolated and lonely. Our friends and partners are now central to our development. Stage 7. Generativity versus stagnation. When we reach our 40s, we become comfortable, use our leisure time creatively, and maybe begin contributing to society. Our concern is generativity. If we think that we are able to lead the next generation into this world, we are happy. If we did not resolve some conflicts earlier, we can become pessimistic and experience stagnation. People at home and at work are now who influences them most. Stage 8. Ego integrity versus despair. As we grow older, we tend to slow down and begin to look back over our lives. We ask, how have I done? If we think we did well, we develop feelings of contentment and integrity. If not, we can experience despair and become grumpy and bitter. Time to compare us with mankind. Erik Erikson was a German-American psychologist who, together with his wife Joan, became known for his work on psychosocial development. He was influenced by Sigmund and Anna Freud and became famous for coining the phrase identity crisis. Although Erikson lacked even a bachelor's degree, he served as a professor at Harvard and Yale.